Okay, let's
just
start.
got a little.
Go ahead and get started. I'm really impressed everybody made it. And even more than that, everybody's sort of sitting to the front of the room. That's a really good sign. Yeah, but at least you're not in like 3 rows back. You know, that's quite unusual. So next week, Poornima's going to be out of town doing some lectures in Europe, and I'm going to take over for next week. But I'm actually going to have a guest speaker in from an IP firm, a really well-respected firm that does a lot of patent work. I won't give away my age, but I worked with them like 20 years ago when I was running a lab for an industry, and the same firm. Probably not the same guys. They're probably retired now. But anyway, we're going to get a couple lectures and some breakouts from that person. Yes?
What firm?
The firm's Myers-Beagle. Myers-Beagle Sedgwick. There's one named Sibley. It was Myers-Beagle when I knew it. And they've added a couple partners. The person's Bob Krause, who's going to come in. But I just wanted to ask you to keep a heads up this weekend. I'm going to send out a reading or two, really light reading, shouldn't be too difficult, but just to give you a little bit of, for those who've never dealt with intellectual property at all, give you a little bit of a flavor of what you'll be hearing so that it won't be the brand new first time. For those of you who know a bit about intellectual property, know a bit about patenting, you should be able to absorb a lot more, and maybe you might be bored for a little part of it because we got to start from scratch. But you can also be thinking about how it applies to your ideas while while you're getting the lecture. So just keep your eyes open. I'll probably send it through Sakai, just because or maybe through Storm, because that's the ACES. That's the easiest way for me to do it. So if you see something with the heading of this course on it, don't delete it just because Poornima's out of town. Okay? Thanks.
Quick question for you, Dr. Glass. I assume that it's just going to record. I don't need to.
That is my assumption too, because we got the IT. John said it would automatically.
Okay.
Yeah, so you should be
good to go.
recording as we go. Yeah,
okay.
Recording as we go.
Cool.
There have been times where that has not worked. Very rarely, when it hasn't worked, I've just gone back and done a separate one again.
Okay.
No audience. So
Got it.
that we will do if necessary.
Okay. All right. So welcome back, everyone. So we have, I know, a couple of new students here. So at the end, we'll just have you talk about your idea and if you're looking for a partner in the class or not. All right. So last lecture we covered ideation, and we talked about ideation being more of a process rather than this mythical idea fairy bestowing upon us some great ideas, right? And a lot of times that idea comes from a combination of things: readings, conversations, past experiences, and passions that we have. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you are all now in that phase of ideation. The other thing that we talked about when we talked about ideation is that depending on the type of idea you come up with, since this is an ECE class, you might either pursue something that's purely a new technology form, something like the incandescent light bulb or transistors, in which case you're going down a path of invention. And when you go down the path of invention, we talked about how a lot of times there is regulations, there's additional R&D, there's infrastructure, and most times it requires a change in behavior for whoever's adopting this technology. So it can be not necessarily a harder path, but a slightly harder path, or one that has to be thought through a little bit more. We also talked about reinvention, right? And reinvention is that concept where you're taking some behavior, some product that people already use. We talked about telegrams or telegraphs versus SMS, versus Twitter. These are all short forms of communication. They're really the same behavior, but different products, right? Different manifestations of the same behavior. Sometimes this is an easier path just because you don't have to overcome that hurdle of people changing their behavior. But at the same time, you're going to have a little bit more competition, and you're going to have to come up with a compelling enough product to get them to maybe switch away from what they were doing before. And then the third thing that we talked about, which is really important, and we're just kind of keep drilling in as we do this class, is this idea of thought crime, right? That you don't have to feel like someone's going to steal your idea, because someone is going to steal your idea. And the time in which they steal your idea just depends on how soon you become popular and successful, because once you become that market leader, someone or the other is going to try to do the same thing in a slightly different way, shape, or form. But the bigger thing here is the reason we share is that we want to not only become that market leader, but we hope to attract people to help us improve our idea And on top of that, it's only going to get better as we share it. And a lot of times we get stuck thinking, we're brilliant or this is the only manifestation of it, when we might be a few iterations away from it really taking off. And then the final thing we talked about was one technique, mind mapping. So if you are stuck in trying to be creative or think of ideas, mind mapping is a way for you to get some thoughts on paper to then see, okay, what are you interested in? What might be a potential idea? What are things that you might be limited in terms of knowledge? And this is actually going to be a good segue to a couple things that I noticed amongst all of you, which is, you probably have an idea, you're just not 100% confident because you feel like you don't know everything about it. And that's okay, right? The issue isn't that you need to know 100% of the ins and outs of the product that you're building, the market that you're going after, or even how the idea will later on become big or how to grow it. Instead, the two main things that you have to do are, or should do, are have a passion for it, have a level of interest, and certainly some level of domain knowledge, right? Not 100%. You don't need to know how to build the whole system, but you should at least know or know people who can help you build parts of it. So the reason I bring this up is because I don't want you to think, well, this isn't feasible, therefore, I can't build it, therefore I shouldn't pursue it, right? If it's something, if it's in an industry or it's in an interest area that you really care about, still pursue it. It just means that you have to find the people who have a little bit more knowledge than you to add to that idea that you're building. Make sense? Okay. So, before we get started on today's topic, I just want to make a couple announcements. Has everybody subscribed to the listserv? I know there were some people who wanted changes email addresses. There's some new students in here. I want to make sure you're all on the announcement because I know I've been sending out emails, so I'm thinking everyone got it, especially since you're all here. The second is, has everybody gotten on Balsamic? I think that was the only other tool. Okay. All right, so just a friendly reminder, Duke Startup Challenge is coming up, and I've heard from a few folks that the first round is really just an elevator pitch, right? Which means you get up on stage, you talk for 30 to 60 seconds about what your idea is, but you don't necessarily have to have a prototype and everything built out. So once again, this is my plug to get all of you thinking and moving in a direction of applying for the Startup Challenge. And I know that there are some other requirements, and we'll try to get all of those requirements filled out throughout this course, but once again, general announcement. Okay, so today's topic is actually going to be on a couple things. The first, we're going to talk about brainstorming, because I know that a lot of you came in last semester and said you had an idea, and now you've decided to put that on the back burner or kill it all together or do something slightly different, which is fine. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to brainstorm. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is team building and why that's important and how to deal with changes in teams. So before we get started, right, the first thing, because we're in this ideation phase, we have to talk about creativity, right? So what is creativity? Who in here has a definition of what they think being creative means?
Having ideas that are different and have value.
Okay, that's a good definition. It's actually pretty close to what it means, which is turning new and imaginative ideas into reality. So, sorry, your name?
Tito.
Tito. So Tito's actually spot on. It's adding value, which means you have to actually bring the idea to reality. If it's purely just an idea in your head and you don't manifest it, then really it's nothing more than imagination. And innovation is the production or the implementation of that idea. So it's putting it into a product or putting it into a service or actually doing something with it. So, how many in here think that, obviously I said that there is a process, but how many of you think that there could actually be a process for being creative? Or there isn't a process for being creative? Okay. Why do you think there's a process for being creative? Or let me ask that differently. Who in here has had a process in which they were able to create an idea? Okay, Krill. Is it Krill or Krill?
That's Krill.
Oh, okay.
It's a very long story, so what would you...
Give me a 30-second pitch.
Thought government would be a good sector to go and explore, especially since Romney's campaign failed so hard.
Okay.
So figured, if there's something bad there, let's go fix it.
Okay, So you had a moment of inspiration looking at the Romney campaign, and then you basically came up with some sort of solution for it. Okay, so yeah, having a stroke of inspiration and then manifesting it into some sort of product or service. So definitely you feel like there is a creative process. So, yes, there is, but the issue is thinking and then being able to produce, right? Those are kind of the two things. It's not enough to just have an idea. You actually have to manifest it into something. And the reason I bring this up, and I don't think anyone in here is particularly guilty of this, probably because a lot of you are engineers, or at least students, but this idea that, oh, I'm just going to have this brilliant thing, but I'm not ever going to do anything with it, right? You kind of have to get over that barrier. It's not actually creativity until you produce it into something. And then, of course, this notion of if it's just an idea in your head, then great, you're imaginative, but you're not actually being creative until you manifest it. So, having said all of this, though, I'm still going to encourage you all to resist the urge to build because we're still in that ideation phase. So, even though I eventually want you to be creative and build a prototype and get a product out in the market, we're still in this ideation phase, so it's okay to not manifest just yet. And the reason is because I want you to go through all the steps of ideation. So, this is still the, as we call it, the romantic period where you get to play around with ideas and, like I said, not feel like you have to worry too much about the feasibility, but instead, what is it that you want to build, or what is it that you would like to see happen? What's the change that you want the world to experience, since that is part of entrepreneurship. So, there's also some ingredients that we say have to get involved in order to actually be creative. And the first is actually the absence of rules and regulations. And I say this, within the context of an engineering school where, we still have to operate in society, and we have to build things that are safe and secure and, value people's personal freedoms. However, barring the policy constraints, because we're in this romantic and ideation period, I would say don't use or don't think about the rules and regulations when you're in this phase, right? I understand there might be local government that's going to stand in the way of your idea and product that's coming into the market, or you might find that you have to deal with other barriers, maybe even like consumers and their mentality. So put all of that aside and instead focus on what is it that you want to manifest, what is that initial idea. You can apply the rules and regulations much later. Okay, so don't let that stop you from thinking of what it is that you want to build, or what problem it is that you want to solve. And the reason I say that is because sometimes these things can be altered. In fact, they can always be altered, especially in the U.S. since we have amendments, right? And there have been lots of cases of this. So even, for example, Airbnb, how many of you are familiar with that startup? Okay, a lot of you. Right? They clearly bucked a lot of laws in putting their product out there. For those that don't know, it's a rental site. It's a peer-to-peer rental site. So you can put up a room and have anybody come and stay in it. A lot of people in various cities were pissed off about this, especially in places like New York and Boston, where there's heavy rent control already in place, and they're really trying to make a lot of money off of prime real estate. But they were offering a very useful service, so they were at some point able to overturn a lot of the laws that were in place. It required a lot of capital, but because they were offering a service that people really valued, they were able to do this. So the second is to explore. And by explore, this is something that is very nebulous, right? And what I mean by this is you have to think about all the different things that you know, right? Not just about the particular problem that's staring at you in the face, right? So too often we put blinders on sometimes when we're approaching a problem, and we think about it too much from the standpoint of being an engineer, or once again coming back to the rules and regulations that we know, and we have to think about it a little bit differently. It's kind of hard to understand, I know, but I want you to kind of have a no-holds approach. And then the third is, some of you might have experienced this already, you bang your head against the wall so many times trying to come up with an idea or a product or how it's going to become feasible. And it's not until you actually walk away completely from the problem or walk away even from the process that it happens, right? So a lot of times my best ideas come when I am sweating profusely on a yoga mat. So don't feel like you have to, be in a room all the time banging your head against the wall. You kind of have to think about things a little bit differently. You have to change your environment. Now, the other thing that I want you to think about, and I know my last lecture said I want you to come up with a big idea, right? Something that's going to be that's going to change the environment. Now, having said that, there is a level of discrepancy here, where I'm telling you pursue a big idea, but you have to start small. And what I mean by starting small is you obviously want to eventually enact some large change, in the entire U.S. market or globally or whatever, right? But you've got to start with one particular problem. The reason you have to start with one particular problem will become more apparent when we do the marketing lecture, but just to give you a heads up, the reason you start small is because when you're brand new, people don't understand what it is that you're trying to do. And not only do they not understand what it is that you're trying to do, but they also might not be able to help you if you go to them with a grandiose plan. So sometimes you have to start very small and say, hey, all we're doing is we're trying to show people their finances on this website. That's it. Right? We're not going to talk about anything else. So you have to take that big vision and you have to break it down to what's the immediate problem that you're trying to solve for folks. And sometimes starting small also means that you can't, while you could apply this solution to a lot of different customer segments or a lot of different people, you've got to start with one particular segment. Right? So the classic example that I like to bring up for all of you is Facebook. Right? When Facebook got started, which is actually the year that I was graduating, 2004, it was just for college students, right? But then over the last 10 years now, almost, they have expanded into other markets, right? But they had to start with one particular segment, develop enough of a following, develop enough of a user base, prove out the product itself, and then they could grow from there, right? But they had one value proposition for one customer. And that's what I'm trying to get at here is you can enact change later on, but you've got to start small first. So as you're thinking of your idea, certainly do all the mind mapping and the brainstorming to think about how it can expand, but then bring it back to what's the first thing that we need to do? What's that first problem? So think about just one problem. Don't think about all the problems that you're going to experience. The other reason I say this is because it actually helps with the issue of feasibility. Right? So you might find that all these other pieces you might not be able to build because you just don't have the resources, you don't have the time, you don't have the knowledge, right? But there might be something within your particular talent and skill set that you can solve first. Now, the other thing that I oftentimes talk about is, we get really consumed in company formation and finding partners and getting out there and spreading the word or doing fundraising or whatever it is, that takes us away from building a product. So what I would encourage is you obviously need to form a corporation and all of that, and we'll tell you how to do that in the upcoming lectures. But the vast majority of your initial stages of development needs to be product-centric. The reason it needs to be product-centric is because, once again, we are solving a problem through a product, right? Now, this isn't me telling you to go out and build. This is me telling you that you need to think, or how you're going to manifest the solution, but this is me telling you you need to think about what are the problems that exist so that you can then tie them in for the later phase of product development. The other reason I bring this up is because too often when we get involved in purely company formation, we lose sight of what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and we start to create other, infrastructure problems. How many of you are familiar with this company called Webvan? Okay, fair number of you. So Webvan, was a really great concept. Basically, they were doing, back in the 90s, or late 90s, the first .com era, they were trying to get people to purchase things online and they would deliver groceries to them. Then they had this awesome team of executives and people with amazing track records. But they put so much emphasis into the structure of the company that they, at the end of the day, and raised so much capital that at the end of the day they didn't have any customers. They didn't have anybody who was interested in the product or the solution that they were offering. And that's because they really lost sight of what the value proposition was to customers, or what the problem was that they were trying to solve. So what ended up happening was this nightmare of overbuilding, over-architecting, people not being interested, and then just, wasting something like on the order of several tens of millions of dollars. So this is why I offer it as a cautionary tale. Now, at the same time, I'm going to say, you need to do some things on a company level. So you do need to put in some infrastructure, especially if you are going down a path of reinvention where you're going to have a trademark, or you're going to have a copyright, or even if you're going down a pure invention path where you have some unique IP, right? Don't, forsake what I'm saying and say, well, does that mean you don't do anything, right? You still want to have some level of protection, but you don't want that to become all-consuming, right? The focus is still, I need to build something substantial, or I need to come up with a solution to a problem. So you still need to have an idea, you still need to pursue that, you still need to think about solutions. So, but not legally, right? Once again, coming back to this idea, don't let the rules and regulations restrict you from pursuing your idea. So, how many of you, kind of either way, but how many of you have seen this device? Okay, and how many of you know the entire story of this device? Okay, so I'll share it with you. The reason I'm bringing up this story is because the founder of this device, Jack Dorsey, didn't make this device, right? He just had an idea, and he came from social media, right? He was the founder of Twitter, still is the founder of Twitter, and he had this concept that he wanted to disrupt the payment space, right? And there was a lot. I mean, you probably all know this because you probably get bombarded with credit cards. But there's a lot of people trying to, build products in this space. And not only are they trying to build products in this space, but some of them have quite a bit of an advantage, right? Visa, MasterCard, all these big credit card companies. And then on top of that, there's already some products on the market that swipe and are point of sale, register, and all these things. But to Jack, coming as an outsider, not knowing anything about the payment space, he still felt like it was ripe for disruption. So, to begin, he basically teamed up with, I believe it was a professor who had built some technology that could, swipe, or basically had a magnetic strip in here, that would then translate the numerical code or whatever, the magnet from your card, into an audio signal, right? That could then go into your iPhone, because that was the first device that they used. So Jack didn't sit there and think, how am I going to create this device, right? He went out and found somebody who already had built the technology. And then he took that and decided, well, we're going to put it into something else, right? So this is leveraging other pieces of technology. And the reason I bring up this example is you can do the same thing, right? You don't have to feel like you need to know how to build everything. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Red shirt in the back. Kyle?
Rob.
Yeah, so Rob had been asked this question at the end of last class. It was like, do I need to build everything from scratch? Can I talk to manufacturers? Can I pull different products together or pieces of products together? And say, yeah, you can do that, right? Just like Jack did. He didn't, like I said, go out and build the entire prototype. He got people to. But depending on what your idea is, you can outsource you can outsource pieces of technology to build whatever it is that you have as a product. The only thing that Jack focused on was the problem, which was, there's a lot of people that have payment options, but the credit card fees are really high, the devices are really complicated, and on top of that, there are some segments of the market that can't even afford to use these, like sole entrepreneurs or peer-to-peer folks, right? So that's why he came up with a device like this. So, and then, of course, they had a period where they built the prototype, and only after they started to get some traction did they go out and raise capital, right? Very different from a webvan. So, another thing I want to show you are 3 simple products today, just to kind of get your creative juices flowing. This first one is from Raleigh. Hopefully the internet will work. Okay. Can you all see this? Okay. So this first is called Illumiscope, and basically what it's doing is it's a macro photography. So it can take really big pictures. Can you all hear? Only on my thing.
Hello, Kickstarters. Thanks for taking a look at my project. My name is Dr. Rhea Gage, inventor of the Illumiscope. Nothing you have will do what the Illumiscope does. Take a look at it.
How do I cut up? Okay, so you get the basic idea behind this Illumiscope, right? It's pretty cool. She's piecing together some different components, and she's basically making it so that your iPhone turns into this really cool optical illusion where you can take very, very detailed photography, right? And she's running a Kickstarter campaign for this. Now, she's doing this, she's in Raleigh, North Carolina. This other guy in Seattle who is basically doing the same thing, except he's calling his a microphone lens, and here's his Kickstarter.
Hello, I'm Tom Slarks, creator of the microphone lens. The microphone lens turns almost any cell phone into a handheld microscope. Whether you're a tech connoisseur, a parent, photographer, or just think it's cool, you'll be impressed by what the microphone lens can do. Check it out.
Alright, so you get the basic gist here of this, right? Two very, very similar products. And of course, because most of us are engineers, we know that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So one woman is doing this by piecing together a lot of different components. He has just created this really simple lens that you can tack on, right? But they're essentially making the same thing. So the reason I bring up these two examples is because you don't have to feel like, you have to create something completely new. Or you also don't have to feel like someone else is doing it, therefore I can't, right? You can have a slightly different approach. You can have a different market segment, and we'll talk about that going forward. But just to give you an idea that there are people, such as yourselves, who are building cool products off of in a lot of different ways, but have similar use cases. Okay, now this I thought was really cool. I might fund this campaign. So this is called Hex. Have any of you seen this before? No one's seen this. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is basically, well, I'll let him speak for himself.
Hey Kickstarter, I'm Hex, and I'm an nanocopter. If you know Arduino, then you'll like me. I like to be useful. I consider myself to be a very efficient delivery driver. I'm never late. I'm always on time. And people like me around here. Like this cat. I feed her every day. Lunchtime. Sometimes I handle some lazy workers in the office. Morning, Steve. Sometimes I even get to help out with relationships. Hey there, what's up? I am also a part-time photographer. Taking pictures and videos from the air is really fun. Faster! Whoa.
Alright, so you get the gist, right? I thought this was pretty cool because you basically just use Arduinos and create this little helicopter, but the use cases of this are pretty compelling, right? Like feeding the cat, delivering interesting trinkets to whoever, or just for those that are lazy and want their keys to be delivered to them. So I only bring these three up just to kind of highlight to you that if you're interested in building not only software but hardware, here are some applications, but the bigger theme of these are pretty simple ideas, right? And a lot of them are reinventions Like he called his the hexcopter instead of calling it something like a robot, which is essentially what it is. It is a little bit of a helicopter, right? So just to give you a little bit of inspiration. All right. So now we're going to talk about, your idea. You might already have an idea, and it's probably good, but an idea can always be made better. And how many of you are familiar with this guy? Everyone's familiar with this guy? A couple people. Who is it?
James G. Duke.
And who knows the story of James B. Duke? Like how he made all this. Well, I know this is an engineering class. You probably didn't take history. Okay, so what specifically about tobacco? Like for him, it was a family business. His parents and so on were tobacco farmers. But what caused Duke to make all of his money?
Rolling cigarettes.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, he was kind of the first, tobacco industrialist that came up with the cigarette, and not only came up with the concept of the cigarette, but mass-produced it. Right. So whether we agree on whether that was a good idea or not, different conversation. But the reason I bring this example up is just to showcase that there can be one idea that's good. So people were chewing tobacco, and it wasn't until someone came and told him that there was a machine and there was this concept of cigarettes that he was able to transform his business, right? So I only bring it up not because I'm an advocate of cigarettes, but because it's the founder of our university. The other reason I bring it up is because he actually had a pretty interesting background. Not only did he have this family business that he was participating in, but he had an engineering background. He was a power engineer. So that's why I say a lot of times this creativity, it requires you to have this multidisciplinary approach. So you have some knowledge and you have some skills. And that's usually enough to get you far. So the most important thing, though, is that you got to know what you know, right? And by that I mean you have a good idea of your own skills and capabilities, but you also know what your deficiencies or your weaknesses are. And the reason I say you have to know what these deficiencies are is because you can recruit for the rest, right? So if you don't know how to get your idea to the next level, or you don't know how to manifest it into a product, that's when you need to kind of get outside and get other people involved. So all of this, of course, begins with this first phase, which is brainstorming. And when we talk about brainstorming, once again, because we're in that romantic period, we're not building yet period, it's not about feasibility still. It's still about what's the idea, what are we interested in changing, and what are some different ways that we could approach it. But it's not, here's the product, or here's the solution just yet. So it's not about productization, and it's really all about imagination. Right? So this is what you're going to be doing when you do your brainstorming for the upcoming lab. And the other thing is it's about vision. And this is sometimes tricky for people to think about, especially when they're young or first-time entrepreneurs. And what I mean by vision is that you need to think into the future of how the world will be different based on what it is, the problem it is that you're solving today. Doesn't mean that you have to accomplish that vision. Doesn't even mean that you have to get halfway there, right? But it means it's a goal that you're working towards. And the reason that this is really important is because this is why people, spend a lot of time and energy in problem solving, because they're working towards some big vision. This is why people put countless hours, right? This is why people put men on the moon, because they have this vision of one day living in space or one day exploring space, right? So you have to think about it a little bit more in terms of what is the ultimate vision. The other reason I bring it up is because this is how big ideas come into existence, right? It's not about, I want to open up the next corner shop. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But it's, we're looking to build something substantial. So when we talk about brainstorming, the first is you're going to work on your idea on your own. And the reason I always tell you that you need to spend some time on your own is because you yourself have to know, once again, what it is that you know, what you don't know. and whether or not you're actually interested in this idea before you wrestle anybody else to get involved. And then from there, you can think about brainstorming with a team. Now, when I say brainstorming with a team, I don't mean that this is going to be the team that you're going to have to commit your life to for the rest of eternity, or even that you have to bring on as co-founders, right? These can be people that just, possibly you think have great ideas, have knowledge, could potentially be co-founders or employees, but you want to get some people involved because your thinking and your experiences are limited. So when you're doing this brainstorming, right, you're going to set up and do maybe a session where everyone's involved, limit it to maybe like 3 to 4 people, and you're not going to go for more than an hour or 2. And the big thing here is that you don't discount any ideas, right? So you've probably done group projects before where there's one leader, and they get up there, and they do all the work, or they force everybody to do what they want. That's not what brainstorming is about. Brainstorming is a little bit more about equality, meaning everyone gets a chance to talk, everyone gets a chance to share their ideas, no matter how crazy or zany they are. There's one person that's keeping time and making sure that everyone gets a chance to talk, but this isn't a, this is the product that we're going to build, and this is what we're going to do. And the reason that you have to do it this way is because a lot of times, the best ideas come from places that you wouldn't expect. My intern just like a month ago had this brilliant idea for marketing that my co-founder and I, it was like staring at us in the face, and we could never have come up with it because it was so simple. So clearly, like him not staring at the problem, he was able to give us this brilliant idea, and the two of us, with our years of experience, couldn't come up with it. So that's why I say you have to give everyone an equal voice. Now, the other thing is you got to take your time, and you want to capture everything. Whether or not you pursue whatever crazy ideas you came up with, you want to capture everything that you thought about, right? Both the good and the bad, both the feasible and the things that you don't think are feasible, the skills that you have and the skills that you don't have, or the connections that you have or don't have. You want to capture it all. So, once you've done all of this brainstorming, then you're going to take some time out, right? Because, like I said, this could potentially be your team of people that you work with eventually. So, the first thing that brainstorming does is it gives you a sense of how interested people are in your idea, right? Because it's that first time they're interacting, and if they don't even participate in the brainstorming session, then chances are they're not going to help you build anything, right? So, it gives you a sense of what their level of interest is. The second is you can start to judge from their contributions in the brainstorming session of what kind of quality of contributions, what ideas they might have, right? Whether they're someone that you want to work with or don't want to work with in the future. And then the third and most important and often discounted is there a level of chemistry? Like, did you actually enjoy the 1 to 2 hours that you spent with this person talking about the idea? Because if you didn't, then you might as well just be like, well, that was a great brainstorming session, see ya at graduation, right? No hard feelings. and that's okay. But and both, or everybody involved has to be honest about that. But the other thing that it does is it establishes that level of camaraderie, and that camaraderie is important in those, bang your head against the wall moments, in those we didn't get the funding that we want, in those the customer really hates our product, we have to go and fix it, right? So you have to have that team and that support, and a lot of it comes out of those initial interactions that you have. So that's why I'm putting a lot of emphasis into this. When you get the slide, you can click on these links, and it's just some additional reading. It's not required reading, but it's just in case you want more information. Now, having said all of this, I know some of you might be like, well, fuck that. I'm still going to go at it alone, right? I'm not going to get involved in a team just yet. I still think that I can make a lot of progress by myself. Well, coming back to this story, when we started, Aaron had this brilliant name for the product, which was Money Intelligence. And I was like, it sounds awful. Like, who the hell is going to want to sign up for Money Intelligence, right? This sounds like something, no offense to Dr. Glass, it sounds like something, someone with gray hair would use, right? And
an academic, either way.
Yeah, exactly, an academic. And if you're going after like 20, 30-somethings, they're not going to want to use a product like that. So, in my moment of brilliance, I came up with an idea for Mint. But it was because, Aaron was open to sharing his idea. We were brainstorming together, and he gave me a good concept of what he wanted to build and the market that he was after. So kind of all of those inputs led me to say, hey, what about Mint? Right? And it made a huge difference in terms of our branding, user adoption, and conveying simplicity. So this is why I say a lot of times going at it alone will help you build a money intelligence, but might not help you build a Mint. So then it comes down to, well, what does it take to pull together some co-founders, right? And that's why I come back to this idea of you know what you know. So you need to identify, you need to really take some time to figure out what are your skills, right? If you're the coder in the group, or you're the one that knows how to build the hardware, great. So what is it that you don't know how to do? Are you uncomfortable talking to customers, or do you not know how to fundraise, or do you not know how to market? So find those people that do have those skills and let them run that particular part of the project, right? Always look for people that have complementary skills. Now, just because I say that doesn't mean that you can't get someone else involved who's also got similar skills to you, right? Maybe they have a deeper understanding in one area versus the other. Now, the other is, a lot of times people will be so passionate about their ideas. Like, man, you gotta work on this with me. It's amazing. You don't want to miss out. And a lot of times people will be like, well, I don't know, you don't have any money, you're always coming up with these crazy ideas, and nothing comes into fruition. So don't approach people with a sales pitch, right? Instead, get them involved in the process. Say, hey, I think you're really great at this and this, and I could use some of your thoughts on this idea I have, right? So get them involved, because once again, it's going to help you judge whether you want to work with them, and if you really think they're as great as they are. But the other is they're going to become more invested in that brainstorming process. Now, the third is you have to be careful of those who come after you. Because a lot of times people will be like, oh, I know this person has amazing ideas and I want to come work for them, or I just think that they're going to be the next Steve Jobs. So you have to be careful about those people, because a lot of times they might have the best of intentions, but they might not have the skills, they might not have the discipline, or they might not have the same level of rigor that you do. And then when you're doing your brainstorms, in your lab, I want you to think of some of these conversation topics. So the first is to actually bring up bad experiences you've had in the past. And by that I mean, did your co-founder leave you? Did the product not take off? Whatever they are. I know it's a painful exercise, but you kind of have to put it on the table so that everybody is aware and they'll have a better idea of why you're making the decisions that you're making. Now, the second is you got to establish some clear standards of communication. And by that, I mean when things are not going particularly well, you have a way of hashing it out. If things are going particularly well, then you also have a way of communicating that, right? But you don't want to just yell at your co-founder that you're a complete idiot and that's why the company isn't doing well, right? So you want to set up some clear standards. Or, hey, I'm really busy, let's not talk about this right now. And then the final, and this is so important, and this is why a lot of times actually co-founders or partnerships don't work out, is you've actually got to have alignment in terms of value and direction of the company. So every co-founder that I've lost, and I haven't lost a handful yet, but I've lost a couple, has always come down to they didn't necessarily believe in the direction of the company that I wanted to go in. And that's okay, right? Because the reason they're saying that is they might feel like they don't have any value to add, they might not have the expertise, or they might just not be interested, right? But it's important that you create this alignment at the beginning, and then you constantly check it if you decide to switch directions in a company. And it's okay. It's all right to, separate. It's not like I said, you're not committed to these people for the rest of your life. So, the other thing is that there is a right time to recruit. Right? Too often we think, right when we got that idea, we got to pull everybody in and start building a team and set up all these agreements and contracts and whatnot. But really, the right time to recruit is when you're committed to this idea. And I don't mean co-founder recruiting, I mean other employees. And the reason I say that is it'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about corporate structure. Because you and your co-founder have some equity stake in the company that's usually equal, but all your employees have a different equity stake. So when I'm talking here, I'm talking about purely employees. So the best times to recruit employees are, like I said, when you're committed to an idea, to a vision, and in carrying it out. And the reason is because, maybe some of you have experienced this in the past, but a lot of times people don't like it when you change direction on them constantly, right? They don't want to be involved. They just want, especially, if you're building something in software, or despite what kind of business you're building, right? They don't want to come in one day to work and the founder's like, well, now we're building something completely different. And they're like, well, great, all the work I did is completely wasted, right? So that's why you want to try to minimize that so that your employees feel like you're making progress and they're building towards something. Wow, it's really hot in here. Anybody know how to turn the air conditioning up?
It should be thing on the wall.
You drop it. That would actually help. Yeah, I don't think we can.
Okay, don't worry about it. I'll ask them. I asked them before, but, apparently they didn't check it.
C is at 62 degrees.
It does not feel like it. Okay. I'm still getting reacclimated with the cold North Carolina humidity. Okay. So, the other thing that you want to be careful of is this idea, in this phase is vision versus implementation. Right? Once again, especially as engineers, I know you're going to get very eager to how are we going to build this? What's the solution going to look like? Is it going to be a mobile app? Is it going to be a software product? Is it going to be hardware? Right? Don't fixate on the implementation yet. Focus on the vision. The reason I say this is because a lot of times the implementation actually has to be dictated by the end consumer. Right? Not just that you're a software engineer and therefore you're going to build a software product. I mean, it's fine if that eventually becomes the case, but you need to take a little bit of a step back and think more about what's the problem that I'm trying to solve, what's the change that I'm trying to enact, and how does that manifest itself. The other reason I say this is because sometimes you will start with one particular implementation, but you'll eventually have to change it. So a lot of times, the classic example I think is Google, right? When they started, clearly to them search meant search in a toolbar, right? But now they're trying to do search on a number of areas, right? And they've even built some hardware products. They're trying to make self-driving cars, right? So they've gone beyond their initial product because they have a bigger vision, right? And their bigger vision is we want to map search for the entire world. And so therefore we have to have all these different kinds of products that we build. And that's why I say don't get too hell-bent on the implementation. So, this is actually probably the hardest thing to do, and that's okay. Which is why I'm encouraging all of you to get up on stage after you start a challenge, because you'll get some valuable feedback in doing this. And that's communicating what your vision is clearly. It's very easy for people to communicate, here's my product, here's what I built, and here's what it does. But it's what are you trying to do, right? Not what is your product trying to do, what are you personally as the founder trying to do? What is that change that you're trying to enact, right? You might have some manifestation of it in the product or in the types of products that you build, but it has to come back to, what is it that you're trying to do? What is the change that you're trying to bring to the world? So, coming back to this, the other reason that you need to communicate your vision clearly is because this actually helps a lot with team building. Because people don't want to work where they're told all you're going to do day in and day out is make hamburgers, right? Okay, that sounds really exciting. But if instead, every day you're going to be feeding people that come in the door, that's a little bit more interesting. Or every day you're going to be feeding gourmet food to people, that's a little bit even more exciting, right? So you have to think about what is it that's appealing to other people that they're going to want to participate. And part of that is communicating a vision. So, these roles are a little bit strict, but it's actually more fluid than what I've listed. So on a team, you will have somebody that's an entrepreneur. But sometimes an entrepreneur and an innovator can be the same person. In this case, just for the definition's sake, we kind of kept it, like I said, limited. So the entrepreneur is the person that's going to motivate or keep people focused on building. We're going for that visionary. The innovator is the one that's got the novel idea or the novel technology that they want to build. But like I said, a lot of times it's one and the same. Then you've got the technologist, right? This is a person that really understands how to bring the product to market, to actually do the implementation, but then they also understand what the business implications of it are. Sometimes these two people exist, sometimes just one person exists, sometimes it's two people. That's why you'll oftentimes see a co-founder, or like a business co-founder and a technical co-founder. And then, of course, the fourth is the investor. If you choose to go down the route of seeking investment, right? They're the person that's going to back the company. But really what they're doing is they're taking the idea or the product that you've built and helping you to appeal to the masses. And that's how I want you to think about it a little bit more, not just, I need money to build a prototype. Now, we've talked about this a little bit already, abilities versus capabilities. Right? What skills do you absolutely need? I know on Tuesday, some of you said, hey, we're only going to take people who are committed or who care about what we're doing, and that's fair. Right? But the other thing that you have to think about is, what are some of the skill sets that you do absolutely need? Does your team not have an engineer, or does your team not have a business person who can do the marketing or the BD or sales? Right? So think about that. And then, this isn't going to be really important in this class, but it's something to file in the back of your mind, is you have to actually allocate time to train people, even in the startup phase. And the reason I say this is because, once again, when you're hiring for capabilities, not everybody's going to know how to solve something or how to do a particular skill set immediately, right? So, for example, if you are a rail shop, right, and the guy shows up and he's like, I got a Java background, they're like, okay, well, let's see how good you code in Java. He might be amazing, or she might be amazing. But if they're really great, you want to give them the time to come up to speed on your technology. Right? So don't immediately discount somebody just because they don't have a particular skill. Have a particular skill. Rather, if they've got the skill set, then that's more transferable. The other is, a lot of times, I've seen this in my case, is it takes people some time to understand what the direction is of your company, or of your idea, and to really understand the user. And the classic, I think, for me, golden rule is 3 months. For people to come in, get involved, understand the direction, and actually make a contribution. And so don't think, whoever you bring on as an employee is immediately going to get what you're doing. They might be able to help you build certain things or solve certain problems, but they're not going to truly understand what it is that you're doing until they've had some time to not only interact with you and your team, but interact with customers and see, the they're building. So, how many of you know what micromanaging is? How many of you have been micromanaged? Probably a lot. Yeah, I was always micromanaged. But I bring a lot of stuff, so I had to be micromanaged. How many of you like being micromanaged? Yeah, nobody likes being micromanaged. So, this is a really hard issue for people who are founders. Especially those that are zealous about what it is that they're doing, right? They want everything to be perfect. They want people to care just as much as they do about their product, right? And so they basically are constantly bombarding their co-founders or their employees and saying, is it done yet? Why isn't it done? Why isn't it perfect? Why is this off, right? So I want you to take a little bit of a different approach instead of this polling approach as you're building your projects in this course, to one where you're doing check-ins. And by check-ins, it's, hey, every Friday or every lab period, we're going to see what the status is, and we're just going to give each other or our group members the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're going to get work done until the next check-in. And we're also going to assume that if they get stuck, then they'll pull us in, rather than one person, constantly doing the polling. Okay? This is a little bit different, probably not something they're used to. And if you're that person who in a team always ends up doing the work, this is a really great way for you to start learning how to delegate to others. And if you find that people aren't taking the delegation that you give them, then that is a really great time to fire somebody. So.
What does that mean in the context of this class?
Yeah, actually, I'll get to that in a second. Don't worry, I've anticipated that question. So, the reason is, this is actually a test of can you focus on making your contributions based on your skill set and let other people make their contributions. The other, which I didn't list here, is it's also a test of can you be someone who will motivate somebody. So it's not just enough to fire someone, because if you were a good motivator, you're very likely going to get into this pattern of hiring and firing, right? So it might not be that people are actually bad employees. It might be that you're not capable of keeping them motivated and understanding what the problem is, or the vision of your company. So, given that you're all college students and you have probably 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many of their classes, a lot of times you have to do things on a part-time basis. You have to make progress in increments, and that's okay. So if you decide to go this route of having either an outsourced team or a part-time team, the first thing you're going to think about is budget, obviously. And by budget, I mean not only time, but money. And then you're going to come up with some clear deliverables, right? Because the one thing that part-time teams need to do is always make progress. Full-time teams, no matter what, they're most likely going to be making progress. But with part-time teams, you want to set some stakes in the ground of, in 1 month, we'll deliver this. And you want everybody to kind of be committed to that, so that you don't have to constantly do the check-in. And their time also might be in flux. The third thing is, when you're going down this route of a part-time or an outsourced team, is you've got to look for the people who demonstrate self-leadership. And this means that they don't need to be managed. And by that, it also means that they can come in and start making progress almost immediately. And the best way, I think, to kind of gauge that is to start off by doing some sample pilots. Right? This isn't brainstorming. This is actually like, here's a small thing that you can go off and build. Depending on how good you do that, then we'll think about doing the next project. Right? So you kind of have to take the role of being a little bit of a project manager and checking in with them. But you give them something small enough that they can demonstrate quality and commitment. So, we just talked about firing people, but we'll get to that. We're going to talk about dissolving a partnership first. So it's very, very likely that somewhere in the course of your entrepreneurial journey, you will come to a crossroads with your co-founder, and you'll have to have this conversation of like, hey, I'm not interested, or things like, you're not interested, or someone's going to leave, right? And that's okay. But you have to be careful about what stake it is they're leaving with, right? It's not just like, hey, that's cool, and they run away with like your code base and your idea and start another company, right? That's not acceptable behavior. But if it's instead one person is no longer interested in this idea and one person is, then you have to talk about, okay, but I still made some contributions even though I'm not interested, so do I still have some ownership? And what does that ownership look like? Right? Don't discount the values that this person has added if they're the ones leaving, or if you're the one leaving, don't also feel like, okay, I can just walk away, right? Take whatever is rightfully yours in the process. But figure out who's going to control the assets going forward, right? Whether it's a code base, hardware, whatever it is, service-based industry, doesn't matter. But who's going to control the assets going forward? So you have to, if you're the person leaving, be comfortable with the person that's staying and taking the company in a certain direction. And then the final is, okay, so let's say you're the one that gets dumped. Or you're the last person standing, doesn't matter, right? You might think about, okay, now I want to bring somebody new in to be a partner, right? And of course, the new person's going to ask you a couple questions like, why did the last co-founder leave, right? Or why are you even looking for a co-founder? So what I found works more effectively is to actually, and this is just my experience, yours will be different, is to actually promote from within. And by that I mean, have an employee who has been committed or made a lot of significant contributions and make them your co-founder, rather than immediately trying to look for another co-founder to get involved in your project. Right? Because think about it this way, whoever just left you and however long you were working together, there was probably a lot of chemistry and camaraderie and a lot of contributions they had made. Right? So how can you just immediately replace them with somebody new that you might not know very well or have worked with on this project? Right? So that's why I say don't feel like you have to immediately find a replacement. Make sense? Okay. So, now we talk about employee. right? Letting them go. So once again, we have to ask, what's the stake they leave with? Because a lot of times when employees leave, they still have some amount of options or equity or compensation that they are owed, right? So you have to resolve that. You can't just be like, don't let the door hit you on the way out, right? And who knows, maybe it just wasn't the right time or they weren't as skilled, but you're going to possibly work with them in the future. The other thing is this employee leaving a transition, meaning they found something else and they're going to leave in 2 weeks, or it's we found you stealing from the company coffers and therefore, please leave immediately, right? So the reason I bring this up is if it's a transition period, then you want to make sure that whatever they worked on, someone else knows, right? You don't want to just throw away all that knowledge base. A lot of times we just pick people out of our companies and they're like, oh, but Joe was really good at doing X, Y, and Z, and now we don't even know how to do that anymore, right? So don't do that, right? Set up a transition period. And then once again, finding a replacement. If it's people leaving on good terms, right? You want the person that's leaving to actually be a part of the recruiting process because they're trying to find someone if you like that person, you want to find a replacement like that, then you want them to also be involved and try to find a replacement for themselves or find another self. Okay. And then the final is knowing that your idea, your product, and your company are going to live on. So just because an employee leaves, or if all your employees leave, or if your co-founder leaves, it doesn't mean that, okay, that's it, it's done. No, it could still continue, right? You have to work a little bit harder. You have to maybe improve some of your recruiting and retention processes. But this doesn't mean that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, like class. What about this class? Right? What happens in the case where you decide that you didn't really like your partner, or you didn't like a particular employee and you want to fire them? Well, that's totally cool with me. But at the end of the day, everybody has to deliver a project in the class. So if you decide you have creative differences or whatever it is, or you decide you're going to split up the project, that's fine. But you still are held accountable by figuring out how you're going to work it out. Right? And even if you decide, hey, we're going to go our separate ways, we're going to work on the same idea, that's fine with me too. But remember, the purpose of this class is to emulate, as close as possible, a real-world experience. So if you come to me, halfway through the semester and say, we're not going to be a team anymore, I'll just say, great. Okay? And, if you can't agree on your idea, but you still want to work together, then you're obviously going to have to figure out how to resolve this, right? If you can't agree on the direction, I'm going to tell you once again, that's something you're going to have to talk about. I will say that for the teams who may have a conflict and will work through that impasse, now I'm not saying this because I want you to create conflict or drama, but you can also highlight that in your final project, right? I want you to explain all the things that you learned in your project. So if that was the case, you can talk about that as well. Okay. And then, of course, what if you need to dissolve the entire team? Well, we've already answered this question, right? You're still going to have to deliver something. So, once again, remember, this is your sandbox to play with. So, you are free to hire and fire as you wish. Don't do it too much, and don't do it too close to the end. But if you do, like I said, have creative differences for whatever reason, that's fine. I still want to encourage you to not go at it alone and to at least find someone to partner with. I would rather that you partner with somebody and then at the end say, hey, it didn't work out, rather than I worked all by myself and all I could come up with was money intelligence. Right? Okay, so just to review, right, we started off by talking about creativity. And the importance of creativity is you're actually going to manifest an idea that you have. But we're in this romantic period where we're not building anything yet. We want to focus on ideation, so we're going to start by brainstorming. We're going to brainstorm a little bit on our own, maybe do some mind maps, but then we're going to transition and get other people involved. The other people that are involved don't have to be in this class. They don't have to be your teammates. They could potentially become your teammates, right? So use it as a way to test each other out. But really, it's to give you some more possibilities and some more brain capacity. And then, of course, finally we talk about team building, right? And how to go about having some conversations with potential co-founders. What are the past experiences that you've had that have just sucked, that you don't want to experience again? How can you create some alignment in terms of your values and your vision? And then the third is, can you put some standards of communication in place? And even if you do decide to dissolve, right, it's not like you're just walking out here. You do the mature thing, and you have divvy up the assets or divvy up the idea or whatever it is. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So I've given you all the lab 1 assignment. Has anybody looked at it? Okay, I know I killed it. Okay. Do you have any questions that I can answer here today on it? Okay, it should be pretty self-explanatory, but just remember, we're not going to meet in lab next week. When you do the assignment, you're going to do the first part on your own, and then the second part is brainstorming, so that's when you can team up with people to do it. And even if you find that somebody else has got an idea and they're committed to it, you can still team up with them just for the brainstorming exercise. So don't feel like you should only work with people who are going to work on your idea. Anything else on the lab? Yes?
I haven't looked at it yet, but when is it due?
It's not due.
Okay, it's just something to
It's just, it's a setup exercise. So there's 4 or 5 tools in there that I've listed that you need to set up. The reason you're doing the brainstorming is because by September 9th, when I get back, the goal is that you will have an idea, forming, and you'll have some teammates that you're working with. So it's not going to be graded. You're not going to turn anything in. It's really just meant to be for yourself. So if I get back and you haven't done it, it'll be pretty obvious. Right? Okay, so there are a couple people that joined this class who had ideas. And last time we went around the room and we shared who we were, what our idea was, and whether we were looking for help. So, Tito, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can do that.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Tito Boert. I'm actually a serial entrepreneur, or I would like to say so. Some of you might have used shelfrelief.com. I started out my sophomore year with Bobby Berger. Maybe some of you have not.
Who in here has? We can do it. Oh, awesome. 80%.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
that was my first company. We sold $50,000 worth of books at Duke. Then we shut it down because it was really hard to expand to other schools. I started another company with Jess Whitson, who's the founder of ShareFile. Right now I run their sales team in Costa Rica, and I've got 15 employees there. We're projecting $750,000 in revenue in the next year, which is really exciting. And I'm in this class because I'm starting a third business, which the idea is to provide a guidance for high school students to get into college just through videos. And the premise of this is we will teach you everything you need to know for essays, recommendation letters, and things like that. I worked at the admissions office for 3 years, so I know the ins and outs. And it's reasonable to charge them around $500, considering a lot of people travel around and visit, so pay thousands of dollars to go around. Tuition is $50K, so $500 is a drop in the bucket. And I think I can get 1,000 people in the U.S. to sign up to this every year. So hopefully it's a $500,000 company that could get started. And it's not that hard to set up, but it's kind of like 4-hour work week type of thing. Like set it up, let it run, get money to put in the bank. So looking for someone to join me. If not, I'll do it alone. But it'd be cool if someone's interested. I'd love to partner up.
What are you looking for?
I have 0 tech skills. I built the website using Wix first. I'm gonna go do unbounce.com. I'm good at analytics and marketing and other stuff. I think I've shown that with my other 2 businesses. But in my first business, I did have a great technical co-founder, and that would speed up things a lot. So if you're technical, that'd be cool. I'm happy to have someone join me. If not, whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks.
Awesome. All right, Walter?
Sure. So I have an idea that actually we're going to do a little bit on. We haven't taken it too far.
Wait, who are you in?
Oh, sorry. I'm Walter. I'm a political science major. I'm a senior.
Go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, sure. So this is an idea that I came up with last semester and then started to develop policy for the summer with internships and all. So the idea is that it's a news sharing website for news articles. And it came about when I was on Facebook one day. I had like 5 tabs open with different news websites, CNN, Huffington Post. And I found one article I wanted to share with my friend. And I thought, I wanted to post it to Facebook, but then something prevented me from posting it onto my Facebook feed because I didn't want to put it there for free to see. So I actually messaged it to a friend and I said, well, why is that process so difficult? Why, if I want to share something, is it wrong for me to post it to Facebook? Because I think there's a stigma of posting things to Facebook that you can only post so much, and it made me think that maybe Facebook is not the place to share news articles. And I think this taps into this general way news is changing. News is becoming more social. The way news is breaking is becoming more social, and more people are learning about events through their friends rather than logging onto a website. So the idea we had was a website which is a social network for news. So what it is news articles. You're not sharing thoughts. You're literally just sharing articles. So it's a place where people log on. You can both share and read the articles on the website. So you don't have to bounce around to 10 different tabs on your computer. And this way, it removes the stigma of posting things onto Facebook. It's different from Twitter because you're not actually reading things on Twitter. It's just linking to other things. So the idea was we'd make a social news website around news articles.
Okay. Oh, and who are you looking for?
So it's very early stages, so people to ideate with. And I'm not a technical guy. I'm a marketing guy. Marketing and brand is my background, so anyone technical.
Cool. All right. Is anybody between Tuesday and today have a new idea that they want to share with the group that they didn't mention on Tuesday? Okay. So I will assume that you'll all post to the listserv and coordinate with each other whether you want to brainstorm or not. I'll leave it up to you. All right. Anything else? Okay. Then I will see you Tuesday from the 9th.